It's more that, when you're writing a book, you're living with it for a really long time and you're writing it and you're rewriting it. And I'm just like, why don't I at least, focus this book around something that I actually, I enjoy too. Because when you're writing about something you don't know, then there's the added work of like research and like have, like I wrote this book Blush about a vineyard, and the research about wine and grape growing was really consuming. And knitting is something I've only been doing it like 6 years. And I went to one, it wasn't a retreat because I lived in New York City, but there was a massive Vogue Knits Live conference. And that's when I realized this isn't just a hobby, it's a massive subculture. And then when I left New York City, I moved near New Hope and I fell in love with the sort of bucolic, um, you know, Stars Hollow vibe. And I wanted to, incorporate that. Every book is sort of just like pieces that I want to braid together to give readers a certain experience. So for the Weekend Crashers, it was knitting and it was New Hope and it was fall and it was that feeling of leaving your real life behind and how transformative that can be. So Maggie and Piper are very close mother and daughter. Maggie's a single mom. She had Piper very young on her own, and ostensibly they're best friends, and it's this idyllic relationship. But now that Piper is in her 20s and really it's time to leave the nest, the cracks in that relationship are starting to show and the problems are surfacing. And the problem is that the mother, Maggie, has fallen into this bad habit of sort of living her life through her daughter. And this weekend becomes a moment of reckoning where that bad habit and that somewhat now toxic dynamic has to be reckoned with. And I think, being the mother of two daughters myself, I understand how seductive it can be to sort of see someone, going through high school, going through college, starting their career, and you kind of want to tag along on that journey, and you have to remind yourself, hey, I did this already. I made my decisions. This is this is hers. So I was kind of grappling with that weird transitional moment of motherhood. Well, it's interesting because originally I just wanted to write about a mother-daughter at a knitting retreat, and it was my editor who was like, "No, we need some kind of like male in presence or something." Like she wanted another element. So that's when the idea came. Oh, so Maggie and Piper show up to this like chill knitting retreat for like hot cocoa and sitting around the fire. And they realize that they're actually sharing this small inn with a bachelor party. And it's not just a bachelor party, it's a bushcraft bachelor party. So
What is
the
bushcraft for those who don't?
bushcraft is it's like living off the land. It's like we're going to like roast our own meats on an open fire and we're going to, cut our own herbs from the bushes and all that stuff. It's like, and there is an art to it and there's like a whole subculture to that as well. So I just wanted something that was like as far away from knitting as possible so that there was optimum tension and contrast. Because in fiction, polarization is the key to creating tension. Polarization is important in a few ways. One, characters have to be polarized. Like if you have one person who's X, you can't have another person who's even marginally X. The other person has to be the opposite of X. That's what makes drama. So if you have women who want to sit inside knitting, what's the opposite of that? Men who want to run around in the woods, chopping things down or whatever. So the Maggie's a single mom, one of the bachelors is a widower, and they meet through their grown children. And Aiden, the bachelor, becomes sort of he's not an antagonist, but his presence raises some questions, some sort of flags in Maggie's mind about not necessarily, she's not really living her life. And what would it mean to actually live her life on her own? Because it's much safer to sit back and try to backseat drive someone else's life. You know, when you have to be in the front seat driving, you're responsible for your own happiness. And I think that's a position she hasn't been willing to be in for a long time. So Maggie ends up waiting at a bar one night, at the bar in the hotel, for her daughter to finally show up and meet her, and ends up sitting next to Aiden, who's also waiting for his evening to begin. And they start talking, and Aiden makes some comment, some dismissive comment about knitting. Like it's not really hard, you know? And so she's like, "Oh, you think like knitting is easier than, fishing?" Or if you think that, I challenge you to get through one knitting class. And they strike up this challenge like, oh, let's see whose weekend endeavor is actually more difficult. And so a playful rivalry between the knitters and the bushcraft bachelor party begins.
And in that regard, I mean, like, who were any favorites from the group that you matched? Like, for as an example, Piper with who was her sort of foil?
So Aiden has a son, and there's sort of this like, definitely underlying romantic tension. And there's the four of them sort of play off of each other, Aiden and his son, Maggie and Piper. And the bulk of the book becomes these four characters playing off of each other to deal with their secrets, their hang-ups, their fears, and ultimately their relationship, the younger people's relationship with their parents, and the parents' relationship with their own lives. The story plays with the idea of, as a parent to an adult child, you're always looking for ways to connect. When they're little, it's really easy to delight your child. Like, let's go for ice cream. I'll take you to this toy store. Like, there's always a way to like ignite the spark and connection. When you're older, it's a little more difficult. So Maggie, the mom, she organized this weekend, and her agenda was, we are going to connect and we're going to have the best girls' weekend ever. And I think, it's kind of sad the things she tries to connect over, they're not really hitting. Like she takes her daughter Piper to like the yarn market, and like in her mind they're going to like bond, and she's going to buy her daughter yarn. And the daughter has like other things that interest her. Like she meets this knitting influencer there and runs off and leaves her mom behind. And I've definitely experienced that feeling with my oldest daughter. How do you find a way to connect like you used to when you were that person's whole world? Then you're an adult and this child's an adult and you're competing with the actual whole world. And it's poignant and it's bittersweet, and I think it's universal. So that was the whole book, is really that sort of feeling of wanting to connect and how it feels when that's a miss instead of a hit.